This video tells the story of a family who decided to take a slightly crazy step. Instead of buying a regular house or even renting one, they bought an entire old school and turned it into their dream home. From the very first day they entered the place, abandoned and covered in dust, to the moment they made it warm and beautiful, today's video shows everything that happened step by step. It covers the renovation, decor, and design, all the way down to the small details that transformed this old school into one of the most beautiful homes anyone could ever see. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any new content. About 4 years ago, they purchased this old school, which was literally falling apart, for $175,000. Since then, they have been working on transforming this 110-year-old building into their family home. To mark 4 years since the start of the project, they decided to create their biggest video to date, sharing the entire story, the reasons behind their choices, and many moments that no one has seen before. From the windows that were leaking water and the roofs they had to repair, to the old beams they saved, the very antique doors, and the large garden full of trees, the journey was a true adventure. In front of us are Stacy and Sean, who decided to live in a place that is more than 100 years old, an old school in the middle of cornfields in the state of Indiana. The building is massive, about 9,000 square feet, and it used to be a public school until it was closed and left abandoned and deteriorating. 4 years ago, Stacy opened an email from the real estate agent they work with. The subject line said not to judge it, and the attached file was a listing for this school. The building was in very poor condition. The roof was collapsing, many of the windows were broken, and bats had made a nest above the ceiling. In short, it was scary, but the moment she saw it, she said, "We have to buy it." Neither of them had any experience in construction or renovation, nor did they even have a clear plan. They also had a small child and were living in New York. Despite all of that, they decided to buy the school. This video shows the complete 4-year journey from the moment they purchased the place until it became a real home for them. They knew it would be difficult, but they never imagined it would be this hard. At the same time, they felt this opportunity would never come again, a chance to build their home in their own way inside a building with a long history and many stories. At that time, they were living in New York. Sean was working in the medical field, and Stacy was working at a small company that was starting to grow. The school was in their hometown in Indiana, close to their family's homes. It was during the COVID period, and everything in the world felt completely upside down. So they started thinking about going back to their roots. When the company Stacy was working for went public, the shares she owned brought in enough money for them to buy the school for $175,000 and begin the cleaning and renovation process. The first time they went to see it after the purchase, they were driving through the fields, and the building appeared in front of them like a small castle rising out of the crops. The excitement was extremely high, but at the same time, they were a bit naive. They had no idea about the disasters that were coming. The first step was cleaning. The entire place was filled with old items, dust, and years of accumulated debris, so they brought in a cleaning crew led by a man named Robert from a company called Treebees. After removing 7 containers of trash, they managed to keep everything original: the doors, the windows, the metal window frames, anything that carried the character of the old school. These things were a treasure to them. The school itself has a long history. It was built in 1914 and served the children of farmers who lived on the outskirts of nearby villages. However, it was closed after only 22 years, in 1936, when the government began merging small schools. Strangely, it did not have indoor bathrooms. Later, a farmer bought it and used it to store apples and raise livestock. After that, a woman who had once been a student there bought it and made it her home, living in it for about 70 years. When Stacy and Sean found it, it was almost a ruin, but still standing, as if it had been waiting for them. They began the journey by restoring the roof, which was the most dangerous issue. Rain was pouring inside, and the roof itself had a hole filled with water, like a small swimming pool sitting on top of the house. After 6 months of waiting due to material shortages during COVID, they were finally able to replace the entire roof. This was the first thing that allowed them to sleep for a night without worry. Of course, there was still a long way to go, so they started cleaning up the yard around the school with the help of Sean's father, who had a tractor. The land slowly began to take on a better shape. After that, they installed a drainage system all around the building to prevent water from entering the basement. In 2022, they started planning seriously. They thought through every detail: the kitchen, the floors, the windows, and the interior layout. They brought in an interior designer named Emily from Indianapolis, who turned all their ideas into real architectural drawings. At that time, they were still living in Philadelphia because Sean was in his final year of surgical training, and they also had a second child. Despite all the chaos, the project kept moving forward. In December 2022, the real construction work began. A contracting company called Robert Young Construction installed massive wooden beams into the floors to support the weight of the new kitchen, which was going to be extremely heavy. After that, they started building the interior walls. In January 2023, a new person entered the picture, someone named Brad, who would become one of the most important figures in the project. This man specialized in brick and mortar work, and he worked on rebuilding all the exterior walls. He removed the old mortar and applied new mortar to prevent water leakage and to preserve the building for the next 100 years. In 2023, the new windows arrived, and they were extremely excited. Unfortunately, this turned out to be the last thing that gave them a headache. Up until the summer of 2025, the windows still had not all been installed due to installation issues and water leaks, and they ended up in legal disputes with the manufacturing company. At that time, however, they were still optimistic. Stacy decided to do some hands-on artistic work herself. She designed 2 matching floor patterns at the entrance, which took her weeks to complete, but the result was a masterpiece. In the summer of 2023, they moved back to live with their families in Indiana in order to finish the project. They thought they would stay for a few months, but they ended up staying there for a year and a half. During that time, Stacy spent her evenings after the children went to sleep restoring old doors. She took on a DIY project, sourcing 23 old doors from other schools, sanding them down and repainting them from scratch. In the fall of 2023, the plumbing and electrical work began. The electrical work was especially critical. Technicians installed more than a full mile of new wiring. While they were working up in the ceiling, they found a 2-meter-long snakeskin, but they didn't pay much attention to it. In November, work began on the asphalt and roads around the building to create an entrance and a garage. A month later, in December, they decided to improve the basement as well. It was extremely scary. The floor was just dirt and mud. So they poured a new concrete floor to make it clean and usable. The workers who did the pour were locals from the same town, descendants and students of people who had once studied at this very school. That moment was deeply emotional for them. After that, they began the insulation work for the roof and the walls. This was a critical step because the building is extremely large. A major discovery followed. Behind the layer of drywall on the walls, they found beautiful red brick. They decided to remove the drywall and leave the brick exposed. Although this was not original to the building's history, the result looked incredible. Brad removed the old layers and then used a sanding machine to clean the remaining mortar off the brick. After that, Stacy began experimenting with different materials to preserve the color of the brick and prevent dust. This took her months of testing. At the same time, technicians installed the heating, cooling, and ventilation system, and the house began to take shape. When they started putting drywall back on some of the walls, the feeling changed completely. It finally felt like a real home. The sound no longer echoed, and the rooms became clearly defined. In February 2024, they began digging the foundation for the new garage, and the children were extremely excited watching the excavators at work. After that, a new person joined the project, Greg, the tile specialist. This man was truly an artist. He started working on a small bathroom, repaired a cracked wall, and once he finished, it looked like a piece of art, so they decided to leave it unpainted. After that, he installed the tiles everywhere, working with an unusual level of precision and calm. Meanwhile, Stacy was working on the brick ceiling on the second floor. She experimented with different materials to preserve its appearance without damaging it, trying dozens of products until she finally reached the right formula. She used a layer to stabilize the mortar, followed by a material that enhanced the color of the brick and gave it a natural shine. In the basement, Brad completed new work by transforming a small room that had been full of dirt and old wiring into a cocktail cellar. He removed all the old pipes, raised the low steel beam, and repointed the brick. The transformation was incredible. After that, they began installing the doors that Stacy had brought back to life. Each door had its own history, and reinstalling them inside the school made the old building feel as if it were breathing again. Later, they went back and removed the old doors and trim, and their friend Chad began installing the doors they had restored the previous summer. Watching them return to their place was something that truly made them happy and made them feel that all the hard work had been worth it. Then came the turn of the baseboards. He would like to say that restoring them came from a genuine love of preserving heritage, but the truth is that the shock of the prices was the real motivation. When they discovered how expensive 8-inch, 16-foot-long baseboards were, it gave them strong motivation to clean out the nails and repair the holes after they finished all the trim that was outside the walls. They began repairing the trim that was still on the walls, filling in the holes and closing the endless gaps. Their routine from spring through summer was consistent, living with their families, putting the kids to bed, then heading to the old school to work for a few hours before going back home, and repeating this process every single day. The window leak problem was holding everything up, constantly forcing them to change their promised timelines and causing long delays. Still, somehow, they managed to get through that phase. One of the most wonderful original features of the school was the front entrance with its windows, the one the children used to walk through every day. They spent a lot of time cleaning and restoring it, and they also learned how to repair broken glass, replacing the panes in the old wooden windows. It felt good to realize that their skills in restoring old houses were improving. These projects made them appreciate people with professional glazing skills even more. At the same time, they were working on the floors. Dave from Guardian Flooring was extremely professional, someone you rarely come across. He carefully cleaned the old staircase and restored an entire room of original flooring. Watching the dusty old floor get covered with newly finished wood was something truly amazing. When they were done, they looked at each other and said how incredible it smelled, and they were all genuinely happy with what they had accomplished. During the same period, the family was also working on their new bathroom, the kids' bathroom, and all of this was done after the children had gone to sleep. In parallel, they began building their kitchen in the old school. They worked mostly on their own without a full team, taking only occasional small tips from Chad and Sean's father, but the majority of the work was done by themselves. They also selected custom cabinets. A double-decker kitchen would have cost them an astronomical amount, so they decided to get creative. They found a company called Semi-Handmade that makes custom fronts compatible with IKEA bases, which turned out to be an excellent idea. When they were in New York before, they had seen the company's showrooms and were very impressed, so they decided to give it a try. They planned the kitchen, ordered all the pieces, and combined their ideas. At first, building the cabinets was intimidating, but once they organized their work step by step, it turned into a fun project like a big puzzle. Even better, they didn't drive each other crazy during the process, despite occasionally getting frustrated. Sean installed all the cabinets by himself, which was a huge challenge, especially since they were afraid of damaging the brick walls. However, with a few tools, the cabinets were completely secure, stronger than any cabinets on a regular wall. At the same time, a man named Arlul accompanied them to a store to select the countertops. The store was full of unique and beautiful stones, offering them plenty of options to choose from. This led them to redesign an entire bathroom because a broken piece of transparent onyx couldn't be repaired. They decided to collaborate with the daughter of a company that collects unused paint colors from all over the country and gives them a second life instead of throwing them away. The company refines, mixes, and turns them into luxurious paints. In the end, they chose all the school's colors from the original palette and created 11 custom colors. Watching Dave and Chris apply these colors to every room brought them immense joy and broke the monotony and fatigue that had built up from the long renovation process. By July 2024, they entered the trim and finishing stage. Every day involved small work tasks, often requiring them to buy new wood and mix stains and finishes depending on where each piece was installed. During this stage, they learned to use spray guns very effectively. They also painted a door between their rooms and the office. Part of it was white, but instead of leaving it plain, they decided to use gold leaf, which was very fun but messy and required careful handling. Later, they realized they needed additional doors for the kids' cabinets. By chance, they met a man named Kyle, who owned a huge warehouse of antique doors in Indiana. They bought 3 old bathroom doors from him that had originally come from an old office building in Detroit. The doors were perfect and unique. Meanwhile, outside, there was a lot of activity in the garage. It was a completely new and different project. What had once been just a computer design was starting to look like a real building. From the street, the front porch appeared simple, but behind it was intense, detailed work. The school was close to the 1914 road, which wasn't a problem back when children used to arrive on horses or small carts. But now, after 110 years, a proper planned road was necessary. They had to submit a special request, meet with planning officials, and explain their situation. Thankfully, it was approved. The columns began to take shape, and the internal structure started to appear. Greg, the tile installer, arrived to fit all the work they had completed over the past 2 years. The feeling was like it was both a birthday and the first day of school at the same time. Next, they installed all the lighting with Sean, the electrician. Every light was chosen to match the historic character of the school, and some of the fixtures were original. They sourced these from Madison Street Salvage, a well-known place that rescues old materials, sells them, and uses the profits to restore historic sites. One of the most special moments was converting the old openings into laser-engraved door medallions. Some bore the school's emblem, while others featured animal symbols that had been in the school. The children each received medallions marked with their birth cities like New York and Philadelphia, with the hope that someday one would exist in Indiana as well. After that, they returned to continue restoring the floors. The floors were finally in excellent condition, and they captured the entire space with a drone. The view was breathtaking. Once the floors had dried, they began moving in the essentials. Everything from the storage units and their family homes was transported by themselves, marking the end of more than 10 years of a transient lifestyle. They wanted to settle down and stay in one place. At the same time, they were finishing the last details in the kitchen. They discovered a broken piece of glass from the old school doors that could be used for the cabinet fronts. For the smaller cabinets, they easily installed the cabinet posts using a jig, and the final result was extremely satisfying. Amidst all this activity, they also installed a small pantry, as there wasn't just one project in the space. Madison Street Salvage helped them acquire a large table that perfectly fit the large kitchen. It came from an old school or library, full of history, and made the space feel authentic and connected to the building's past. Madison Street had received a huge donation of tables, and the table's base was still in excellent condition. While unloading the trucks, they found this massive, sturdy table in the center of the load, covered with markings that told the story of its work and history. It was so perfect that it didn't even need to be refinished, and it matched beautifully with the chairs they had previously found from a store called Leonard. After they discovered that store, they realized that the chairs were originally from the old elementary school, truly a treasure in their new kitchen. While the space was being organized for supplies and bags, the work in the garage didn't stop. Quality Roofing, the company that had installed the main school roof earlier, returned to install a rubber roof on the garage. Meanwhile, Jack, who specializes in glass, worked on the seams between surfaces, while Mike and Pat handled the roof itself. At first glance, the roof looked simple, but in reality, it was a small engineering project. The entire roof was sloped correctly to ensure proper water drainage, making its construction a very complex task. Throughout all this building work, everything seemed easy on paper, but executing it required patience and focus. Thankfully, everything was accomplished successfully. The garden was a completely different story, much harder than they had expected. This challenge recurred throughout the entire renovation project. Adam and his team from Air Earth returned to install proper water drainage from the garage all the way to the back of the garden. During this work, they discovered an old sewage system and decided to fill in Berg Gorge to prevent anyone, young or old, from falling into the mysterious hole. Once that was completed, Adam's team returned to level the ground and prepare it for planting grass. At first, the writer thought he would plant the grass seeds himself because he loves gardening, but Adam guided him step by step. There were 57 steps required for the grass to grow properly. Even with clear instructions, the writer felt a bit overwhelmed, so Adam's team took over the task entirely. They moved quickly with their ATVs, much faster than he had planned. Still, he participated in watering the new grass 3 times a day for 6 weeks. This ended up being the hardest work for him throughout the entire school project. Balancing the birds, the water, the sprinklers, and the children at the same time tested his patience to the limit. A few weeks after moving in, they organized their first party. Sean's sister was getting married, so they hosted a big dinner for her and her friends in the school. The new table had its first major test, and it passed with flying colors. Despite completing many projects, they discovered that the windows were still leaking after the second installation. This meant that every rainfall caused concern about rust on the metal, and this problem persisted for a full year. Away from the leaks, they continued transforming the school into a true home. In the fall, the writer brought in some special pieces from Madison Street Salvage, like a pastel-colored Europe map. He also acquired an old school painting from Indianapolis, Indiana, from another store. They loved placing these pieces in the school whenever they found the perfect spot for each one. They were still working on the reclaimed and repurposed basics, but one of the biggest gains was a set of office book cabinets recovered from a building owned by Sean's father. It felt incredibly rewarding when they arranged the books and placed everything in its proper spot. Next, they worked on all the glass for the original doors that had been restored. Not just any old glass would do, it needed to be shatter-resistant for safety and to pass building inspections. They requested glass in a repeated vintage style and installed it in about 12 doors throughout the house. This could have been a crazy project without the small corner-cutting tools they used. Then, the writer used a Cricut machine to add the children's names to the doors, making it feel as though they were little teachers with their own desks. They also managed to install small chalkboards on the doors. In the fall, some magical moments happened. The lighting inside and outside the basement suddenly transformed the space. Then, Iman, a producer from the Tamron Hall show, reached out to feature the school in an episode about unusual homes. They gathered the children, traveled to New York, and appeared on television. Something remarkable also happened with the empty roof. Their YouTube channel was starting to gain an audience, which opened up an opportunity to work with a company called Polywood. Polywood manufactures durable, recycled plastic exterior foundations right in Indiana. Sean traveled to the factory for a behind-the-scenes tour and witnessed the process of transforming recycled glass from cleaning and milk bottles into a long-lasting foundation. Why was this so important to him? Because the entire project was about reviving and giving new life to old materials. In December, they installed the railings on the roof with Paul and his team, allowing the children to safely use the rooftop. The rest of the winter was focused on smaller indoor projects, like replacing an old clock mechanism with a quartz motor, among other details. In the spring, they began building a large playground for the children, like a life-size Lego set with slides, swings, and climbing walls. They also installed 16 bird houses and planted over 60 native trees, ranging from oaks to pomegranates, planting a secret garden for the school. Fernando completed the front facade roof, and they began preparing the rooftop for the Polywood Foundation. They installed a flex spot canopy, which transformed the roof into an outdoor living room, adjustable shade during the day and soft lighting at night. Their first big party was a surprise birthday from their mother-in-law, which demonstrated the school's capacity to host many people. Back inside the house, they tackled a previously useless corner and converted it into a glass bookshelf between two rooms, using old glass from Madison Street. They placed treasures and books donated by friends, along with an old lamp the writer had made 15 years ago. Finally, the contractors installed all the windows permanently, resolving the water leaks once and for all. After 4 years of hard work, gathering pieces and unexpected surprises, the school had finally become a real home. From the moment they first stepped inside, it had been just a dream. But after 4 years, while the projects weren't entirely finished, they now had a house full of life. The home wasn't just a place to live anymore. It had become a space where they could learn, laugh, and host family and friends. In the end, after all the effort, sweat, and laughter, they had a place they could truly belong to, a place they could call home, and they knew that every drop of sweat and every hour of hard work had been worth it. The old school was no longer just walls and a roof. It had become a home, full of memories and a story of deep love for everyone who contributed. The little family now had a lively space amidst the fields. And that's it. That's today's home, the school they transformed into a house, thanks to their design genius and restoration work. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.